So, welcome to CARST's guideline for conducting a real estate screening assessment as part of a real estate transaction of a residential dwelling in Canada. The purpose of this webinar is to walk you through the document and basically give you the highlights. So, we'll be presenting the 3 Canadian options for dealing with radon during a real estate transaction, and then some tools that we've developed that you can use when dealing with real estate agents and clients. So why does radon come up during a real estate transaction? Well, homeowners trust their real estate agents. They've built a relationship with them over the course of the time that they've been searching for a home, and they're attentive to the things their real estate agent talks to them about, and they're also prioritizing their spending. Our message is that radon is an important consideration when purchasing a home. So, homeowners are prioritizing their expenses. As they shop for homes, they're considering potential expenses that may come up, be that a roof, a high efficiency gas furnace, older windows, the pool, a hot water tank. So these are all potential costs, and they all have different priorities. Some of them might be a lower priority because they'll last many more years. Some of them might be a medium priority, but most of them are not a health concern. So our message is really radon should be a high priority because it is a health concern. We want them to sort of make a note to themselves, like this image demonstrates, to test when they move in, and for them to rest easy knowing that even if they do need to mitigate their home, we're talking about $3,000 to $3,500 on average to fix the home. It's very important. So there are 3 options in Canada. Basically, test, protect, then sell, sell, then test and protect, or the real estate radon assessment. So we'll walk through each of these. Option A, this is an ideal situation wherein the seller has conducted a long-term radon test before listing their home. It's a proactive solution. It ensures a healthy environment for everybody going forward. It gives the seller peace of mind since the radon level is known and it's been addressed if required. That's the important part. If they did test high, hopefully they've had a C-NRPP professional install a mitigation system. The role of the realtor when this is the situation is to help the homeowner understand that all homes can be fixed and encourage them to resolve their radon problem if it hasn't been taken care of, to direct them, as always, to a local C-NRPP professional, and to help potential buyers to understand the value of a radon mitigation system, since it's not every home that has been tested for radon, and it's not every home buyer who's even heard of radon. It's important that we educate realtors so that they can spread the word. So the second situation that could exist is that the home buyer buys a home and then conducts a long-term test after the sale is complete. Advantages to this option are that the people living in and investing in the home make the decision. It, again, ensures a healthy environment for everyone going forward, and it gives the buyer peace of mind because they're the one in charge of the test, they know it was done properly, and it's them making the decision. The role of the realtor is, again, to help the purchaser understand that all homes can be fixed, to tell them that people don't need to be afraid to buy a home because of radon. They can buy the home, and then even if the radon level is high, it can be fixed. To encourage the purchaser to test the home during the first heating season that they're in there. So, don't just forget about radon. Make sure you actually follow through and that you test your home. And then direct their client, of course, as always, to a local C-NRPP professional. So now, that was option A and option B. Why did we develop the real estate assessment? Well, because more and more people are wanting to have some indication of the radon level in their home at the point of the transaction. Real estate agents are trying to protect their buyers and they're asking for a radon test during the inspection. The US has 48-hour real estate testing, and there's some information spillover. Canadians are wanting to do that in some areas because they've heard about it. The lack of clarity in guidelines that exist right now has led to litigation, and it's not good for the buyer, it's not good for the seller, it's not good for anybody involved. So everybody's looking for guidance on what to do. And above all, we want to avoid an unfair prejudice against a home because of the lack of guidelines or information about radon. So the radon assessment, as you'll see over here under the stoplights, involves conducting a radon assessment as part of the transaction and then testing the home for radon and mitigating if required. So the real purpose of the radon assessment is to give an indication of the likelihood that a radon mitigation will be required so that it can be considered and included in negotiations if possible. We're talking about a short-term test of a minimum of 4 days under closed house conditions. Now, if you have attended the short-term testing, C-NRPP short-term testing webinar, you know that short-term tests range from 48 hours up to 90 days. The 48-hour ones are really only applicable to testing whether a mitigation system has been effective. For real estate, the minimum is 4 days. 48 hours is no longer acceptable. We then split the results. If the results are above 75 becquerels per meter cubed or 50 in summer, this suggests that, that the annual average could be above 200. We always emphasize that a long-term test be conducted during the first heating season after the new owner moves into the home. And this document provides guidelines on how to conduct the test for consistency with giving notice of the testing and some guidelines on how to prevent interference. So here's a brief flow chart for the process. You perform the 4-day radon screening test in closed house conditions, obviously, and then the test results come back and they're either green, yellow, or red. If they're green, basically the sale proceeds with no further radon consideration. Of course, we emphasize that the purchaser conduct a long-term test during that first heating season. If the results come back as either yellow or red, well, then the purchase negotiations might include allowances for the cost of a radon mitigation system. We don't want to get into details of how that might happen. That's really up to the real estate agent. That's their job, is to guide everybody through the transaction. But we want to walk them through the radon testing portion of that transaction. So we'll go into detail here. If the test results are green, that means that the results came back after 4 days as being either below 75 becquerels per meter cubed in the winter or 50 in the summer. And this suggests what we feel is a low likelihood that the annual average radon level is above 200. So our recommended action is that the transaction proceeds and the buyers conduct a long-term test during the first heating season after they move into their new home. If the test results come back as yellow, that means the result is above 75 becquerels per meter cubed in the winter or 50 in the summer. And this suggests a slightly higher possibility that the annual average levels are above 200. The recommended action is to make arrangements during the negotiations with the seller to take into account the increased likelihood that the home will require mitigation. Again, the details are up to the real estate agent. And take note, as always, that ultimately, whether or not mitigation is required can only be determined after a long-term test has been performed once the buyer takes possession of the home. And finally, red. If the result comes back after 4 days above 400 becquerels per meter cubed, this suggests a much higher likelihood that the annual average could be above 200 becquerels. And our recommended action is to make arrangements during negotiations to take into account the increased likelihood that the home will require mitigation. But again, we only require that mitigation actually take place, or we only suggest that mitigation actually take place if they conduct a long-term test once the buyer takes possession of the home and it does indicate an elevated radon level. So no matter what the result of this assessment is, we always recommend it be followed up by a long-term test during the heating season, just like Health Canada recommends. So, as with all short-term testing, there are some conditions that need to be respected, and there are additional conditions given the nature of the transaction. So, anti-interference measures. Interference or tampering is more likely during a radon assessment test as part of a real estate transaction. So these anti-interference measures could include having the responsible person sign an anti-interference agreement, using a device that frequently records the radon level as well as the temperature and barometric pressure to detect any changes that could indicate that the device has been moved, for example, or taken out of the building, sealing doors and windows with anti-tamper tape, or employing a motion detector to see if the device has been moved. I'm sure there are others. People can be quite creative. Closed house conditions must be respected during the course of the test. So that means all exterior windows must be closed. Exterior doors are only to be used for momentary entry and exit. Whole house fans and window fans should be off during the testing period. Fireplaces and wood stoves should also not be used unless they're the primary heat source. HRVs or ERVs should be left to operate or not as they are found. If it's plugged in and working, you just let it go. If it's unplugged, leave it unplugged. No matter what the condition is, you just let it as you found it. Heating and air conditioning should operate normally, and window unit air conditioners should operate only in the recirculation mode. And devices that are labeled as radon mitigation devices shall be in normal operation. So the report. There is a special report included in a radon assessment test. So it should include the following information. All the information that would normally appear on a radon report, plus whether the home tested green, yellow, or red, the numeric radon assessment result, that would be the measured level in number form, and a mention of the anti-interference methods used during the test and the recommended follow-up actions. So we have an example. Here's an example of what a radon assessment report could look like. This is available to you on our CARST website. And it's not required that your report looks exactly like this, but this report does include all the necessary elements. So the radon assessment result is indicated here. It is a yellow box and it's also written yellow. If this were to be photocopied, it would still be clear which color category the result fell into. We mentioned that we're going to give them an explanation and recommendations of what this test result means. The detector type is indicated here, continuous radon monitor, and the test result in numbers is indicated as well. The next section of the report, we give the recommendations of exactly what a test report result, yellow, what that means. So here we've said radon remediation may be warranted and consideration should be made for a long-term follow-up test and installation of a radon mitigation system. You'll notice that there's some text here in strike-through. When this guideline was first put out, we included this next sentence, which is purchase negotiations should take the potential cost of a mitigation system into account, for example, setting funds in escrow. But realistically, upon further discussion with the various players, it was decided that we should really leave the exact details of what the test result, how that's used in negotiations. We should be leaving that up to the real estate agent. That's their job. And furthermore, some of our C-NRPP members are simply laboratories issuing a report, and they didn't feel that it was right for them to be including these types of recommendations, especially given as they weren't even the ones involved in placing the detector in the home. So we've removed it. And on the last portion of the example report here, we've got references for the client where they can find additional information and a description, as we mentioned, of the anti-interference methods that were used. So here you would describe exactly what you've done to avoid interference or tampering. So as we promised, we do have tools to help you. So whether they be for homeowner discussions, this page here, thinking of buying or selling your home, it's sort of a simple infographic presentation of why people would consider radon when buying or selling their home. It's available in English and French. Or when dealing with real estate agents, this radon and real estate, why radon and real estate handout. This is a one-page document that summarizes all of our guideline on including radon as part of a real estate transaction. And its target audience is definitely the realtor. It explains what their role is in each of these situations and how they can make it easy on their client. And of course, we have additional handouts. Many of them, this one here demonstrates an illustration of a radon mitigation system and helps people to understand what's involved in that. So all of these documents and the short-term testing guideline and a CARST real estate testing guideline may all be found on our website. We'll just put them up on the screen here. Thank you very much.